Good morning, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here today, and I'm looking forward to speaking with you and discussing further how we can go about building sustainable urban communities. We are living in a moment of extraordinary change, and the areas that I'll be talking about in relation to sustainable communities are obviously affected by that, but I won't be concentrating on the wider picture at the moment. But however, economic systems are changing, social structures are also under strain, and environmental limits are being tested. And technology underlying this is advancing faster than many of us and our institutions can adapt. Against that background, that raises challenges for including urban communities, for everyone, including urban communities. And I'm hoping today to concentrate on cities, but dropping down into areas of cities as well. For those of you who don't know me or have never met me, my name is Dr. Cathy Garner. I'm currently president of an organization called the World Capital Institute. This is a think do tank. We give research into practice and have for almost 20 years now worked across continents to translate that research, knowledge, and insight into real world action, particularly in the context of urban development and what we termed knowledge cities. We are currently based both in Latin America and in Europe. And if you have some questions you want to ask when I am presenting, please add them to the Q&A. Thank you. So, to start, by 2050, around 70% of the world's population will live in cities, towns, and urban settlements. That means that cities are no longer places where problems just show up. They are where the biggest decisions will be made. They are where inequalities are either locked in or addressed. They are where sustainability either succeeds or fails. Now, sustainability is most often framed as purely an environmental issue. And of course, that matters deeply. But sustainability is also economic. It is social. And above all, it is human. At its simplest, sustainability means this, or this is my definition: meeting the needs of today without undermining the ability of future generations to meet their needs. But sustainability is never universal, it's never neutral, and it is never context-free. You will hear me use that word context repeatedly. Cities are not the same. They differ in size, from megacities to smaller towns, and in geography, they range from coastal settlements to desert margins. In culture, they have different histories and different capacities. Some cities are growing massively rapidly. Others are shrinking, and quietly and invisibly. There is no single model for a sustainable city. I love this phrase. It was brought to me by an old friend, and I keep repeating it. The ingredients for sustainability may be the same, but the recipe is always different to meet the needs of place. So where do we begin? Excuse me if I just... Where do we begin? How do we deal with complexity without being overwhelmed by it? One useful way is to look at cities through three connected lenses: the economic, the social, and the environmental. I'm sure you're very familiar with these. And these pillars no longer stand apart. They need to be balanced against each other and connected. Because economic decisions reshape social outcomes. Social pressures intensify environmental risk, and environmental failure feeds inequality and instability. What cities are facing is not three unique challenges, but one interconnected system under strain. But let me start with the first pillar, economic. Because through history, when economies change, cities have to change with them. Today, we're living through a profound shift from industrial economies and industrial cities to economies built on intangible knowledge, data, finance, services. The impacts of intangible economies may be less visible, but they are no less powerful. When industrial economies declined, the consequences were immediate and obvious. With today's economic models, the warning signs may be quieter. Value concentrates, opportunities narrow, and by the time the social consequences appear, cities may already be on the back foot. History shows us that the costs of economic transitions usually emerge late and are borne locally. Now this pattern is accelerating through automation, artificial intelligence, data-driven systems. These forces are reshaping work faster than governance systems can respond. Cities will experience the consequences, but they rarely control the levers. Yet cities are not powerless. Around the world, alternative economic approaches are emerging, such as economy for the common good, focused on shared prosperity, stakeholder values, and local wealth building. They are not silver bullets, but they reflect a growing recognition that resilience is not just about competitiveness. It's not just about the economic issues. It's about inclusion and it's about adaptability. Because when economic systems fail or get out of proportion, they fail socially, they fail spatially, and cities have to be able to manage the consequences. I mentioned the second point, social ruptures. Economic change never stays just in the economy. It shows up in people's lives, in widening inequalities, in generational divides, with currently a major issue of disengaged youth and also at the same time massively aging populations with rising in loneliness, declining trust, and political polarization. Cities, however, concentrate the opportunity to make that change, but they do also concentrate vulnerabilities to that change. Knowledge-based economies in the transition from industrial economies have created extraordinary success for some, but regrettably leaving others behind and increasingly excluded. This is not just about income. It's about security, people's voice, and belonging. As work becomes more precarious, housing more unaffordable, and services more stretched, many people feel the city is no longer working for them. Digital technologies and the pandemic, of course, increased wider connectivity, but also increased isolation. They did expand information, but in some cases have eroded trust. multiplied participation, but concentrated powers. These pressures are playing out across generations, creating distance where shared experience once existed, where grandparents and youngsters could walk together in the streets safely and feel happy. And this matters because social cohesion is foundational to resilience and resilience in communities. But these outcomes are not inevitable. Inequality, this is from Joseph Stiglitz, who some of you may recognize as a very long-leading economist. Inequality is not the natural outcome of economic laws. It's a result of choices. It's about policies. It's about priorities, which means that individuals and cities can intervene, but in doing so requires confronting that inequality directly, rebuilding trust with the community, and recognizing how economic, social, and environmental pressures intersect. Without social cohesion, economic resilience weakens, and without inclusion, sustainability becomes impossible. The third pillar, the environmental pillar. Cities consume most of the world's energy. They generate the majority of emissions because of the high levels of population. They concentrate risk. They have massive challenges for many on heat stress, flooding, air pollution, water security, food insecurity. These are no longer future risks. They are, unfortunately, present realities. Environmental systems are deeply interconnected. Actions taken in one area can trigger unintended consequences in another. And critically, environmental crisis is not experienced equally. The causes are concentrated, but the consequences fall hardest on those with the least capacity to respond. For example, the fragile, vulnerable issues of informal settlements on the edge of cities. That makes this not just an environmental issue, but a justice issue. Cities are where the greatest opportunity lies, however, to address these issues. Density enables efficiency, proximity enables innovation. Urban governance, when it works, can act faster than national systems. But this requires integrated thinking. Environmental action cannot be siloed. It cannot ignore social realities, and it cannot be treated as just a technical add-on. Without environmental resilience, economic gains are fragile. Without environmental justice, social cohesion fractures. And sadly, we are seeing that in the UK quite regularly. There are many examples of approaches that we can adapt for environmental improvement, such as nature-based solutions. And many cities during the pandemic, because of the reduction in travel, etc., made great progress in this and can be applied as long as we recognize the process. So let me leave you with these thinking points from this chat. The future will be urban. The growth continues, but sustainability is not guaranteed. Economic fertility, social rupture, and environmental crises are not separate challenges. They meet in our cities. And that means cities are not just where the future arrives, it's where that future is decided. The choices are clear. Do we design cities for the short term or the long-term well-being, for economic results alone, or for people also? Because when cities integrate economic resilience, social inclusion, and environmental responsibility, they just become sustainable. But not only that, they become places where people can thrive. The question is no longer whether cities will shape the future, but what kind of future we choose to build. And from experience working with cities, I think that the key elements needed to build sustainable urban communities with strong social capital might be summarized in 5 points. Recognizing and celebrating the city's history, its identity and history, building on this and creating a vision for the future. Thirdly, engaging with the community and recognizing that many high-level national policies need to be changed and adjusted for local circumstances. I repeat this word, context. Context is everything. Leadership is required in the cities. And where cities have had brilliant leaders, we see change, we see development, we see equity, we see environmental concerns being addressed. This is so vital. But we need commitment over time. It's not a quick fix. We need to be determined to make that change last. So I conclude now on this overview, and I would be happy to illustrate with some examples if we have a bit of time, and talk about some of the cities that I have worked with over time, such as Singapore, London, of course, and my greatest love, Manchester in the UK, where I worked for almost 10 years to build what was called Manchester's knowledge capital. And these examples are real examples of incredible transformation. If you look at Singapore, for instance, you see the journey from a post-colonial city in the mid-60s to a thriving first world economy, with driving the compelling case for visionary leadership, sound governance, and strategic policymaking. In the span of a few decades, Singapore moved from widespread poverty and instability to achieving living standards and infrastructure on a level with the richest nations. Despite the dire conditions that Singapore's early leaders inherited, they took bold steps that laid the strong foundation for future success and the strategies that were pursued from the outset. There are 7 key lessons from Singapore. Governance is vital. Security and the rule of law is important for economic activity. Human capital investment. Economic openness, allowing trade, private enterprise can compensate for limited resources which you have. Reform, and I don't mean the British political party, prioritization on security, governance, and infrastructure. Importantly, social cohesion. National identity or city identity can be massively important in getting people to come together and recognizing this. And contextual adaptation, understanding what this place actually needs. We have a few more minutes. Singapore is massively recognized now as a city that has totally transformed itself to be inclusive, economically viable, and environmentally conscious and active. London, from my experience, of course, is a vast city, and there is no way you could say that London as a whole is all the same. It is hugely variable. hugely different. Many cities are like this and have different neighborhoods which vary across whole spectrums of change and circumstances. The area that I worked on and have just published in is looking at the innovation hubs in London, which have been fascinating, how they've developed, how they've influenced the communities around them. And universities have played a really important part in this, both in the invention and innovation, but even in London, universities can play different and significantly different roles depending on the needs of the places in which they are located. And innovation is so important when we hear about the massive change in technology, the massive factors that we are dealing with. Innovation today is critical as it drives not only modern economies, but also solves complex problems such as health, well-being, and sustainability. And this was greatly recognized in the pandemic years in the 2020s. From examining research and practice over time, 4 key human capital assets can be identified as contributing to unlocking the potential for innovation in an urban context. Again, we come back to what we heard from Singapore: appropriate leadership, deliberate opportunities for knowledge exchange with the community, for the community, with academic areas, with business. A culture which accepts risk and potential failure. We don't always get it right, but we can amend. Networks that connect locally, nationally, and globally. These, as a study, call it conditions precedent, affect the probability of successful innovation. In London, the 3 examples illustrate the importance of context and place and their identities. Some of you will be very aware of what's called the Knowledge Quarter in London. It reflects a certain model of innovation districts. It's not perhaps a traditional one, but there are over 100 partners in there employing thousands of people and based on anchor institutions of the University College London, British Museum, Royal Veterinary College, Wellcome Trust, the British Library, King's Place Music, the Alan Turing Research Centre, Google, the Digital Catapult, and Francis Crick Institute. This area used to be a major industrial hub for London, and its industrial past is still recognised today, echoed in many of the streets, incubators, and accelerators. The area, one of the key features of KQ, as it's called, is the nature of the leadership, which it pulls institutions of the area together with the key purpose of sharing and exploiting knowledge for the benefit of the economy and society. Its local boroughs of Camden and Islington have high levels of income and health inequality and child poverty. And this challenge has been addressed in this innovation district, drawing up a collaboration with those councils. And the 2050 vision shared sets out 3 key principles which can be admired, not only for growth in life and data sciences, links to local unemployment and business, an ambitious engagement with local government, and sorry, a message just came in. Local government and councils, particularly with young people, working groups with groups of employers KQ has already set in motion for young people to become laboratory technicians for the local life sciences cluster, and finding degree places for local scholars. Google even offers career certificate scholarships in Camden. There are other places called White City and Tech City. And for those of you who've been aware of London for a long time, we had the model of emulating Silicon Valley and decided we would have a place called Silicon Roundabout. While it was amazingly successful initially, because it was a place where rents were low, there were large spaces to work, artists began to move in, followed by cafes and bars. And the saddest thing that I can tell you about this place, it was going so well, open to people and growing. However, when the government decided that this was our area, which was imitating Silicon Valley, it became engaged in the area, changed the nature and context, and didn't understand the context in which it was operating, and created what was basically a hostile environment because this area had been built through migrants who had come to the country over years by discouraging in migration. However, in an interesting turnaround, when this kind of caused the collapse in this innovation area, following the Olympics that were held in London, a new venture was set up called Here East. And this is a private sector led venture and is doing remarkable things in the same area. I think the learnings from London's ecosystem, and I'm getting very boring again now, it's context dependent. The nature of place, together with the inherent sense of place, derived from its history and the institutions that are anchored there, are really important. These places can celebrate their history, but likewise must not be trapped into obsolescence by its character. All the areas in London have vital stories to tell of the city's history and the paths taken to move forward. And it's delightful to know that in KQ, they still use the old names from Granary Square, the Coal Drops Yard, and the Regent Canal. This was industrial area. It is now a key knowledge and innovation centre. I would like to finish as a little example to go to my favourite city, looking at Manchester and Manchester Knowledge Capital. Manchester's transformation from a post-industrial city to a knowledge city is something that I worked in the front line of for 5, 6, 7, 8 years. And it could be said, and is said in a publication I wrote, nowhere innovates like Manchester. Manchester was one of the world's first industrial cities. It was the birthplace of the nuclear age, when Ernest Rutherford's pioneering research, and maybe we're not very happy about this today, but led to the splitting of the atom. The computer revolution started here in 1948, when a machine was built, known affectionately, the machine was known as the baby, ran its first stored program. It was at the university that the economist and logician W.S. Jevons formulated the principles of modern economics. It was at the university that Jodrell Banks site in Chester that the Bernard Lovell built the world's largest radio telescope just after World War II. Great traditions have also flourished in architecture, mathematics, music, law, and many other disciplines in Manchester. And Benjamin Disraeli, in the 1800s, was quoted to say that what Manchester does today, the world does tomorrow. Manchester tells us much about what makes a place supportive of innovation and inclusion. The University of Manchester is a very key player in this and continues to be a key player. Manchester University is a global leading research in work that led to, most recently and famously, the isolation of graphene, which has changed our building approaches dramatically. But it is also Manchester. Social innovation is key. Manchester has a long record in social innovations that have provided models for community and society, so much that the famous historian A.G.P. Taylor is quoted as saying that Manchester showed how people, should live as a community. The history here shows radical innovation and innovation in response to human wants and needs, summed up perhaps by the historic name of the Manchester worker bees. And may I just finish with a little story from Manchester and Manchester's engagement with the cotton trade. At the time of Manchester's cotton working, Manchester mills thrived on cheap cotton from the American South. But what they did not like was this was grown by enslaved people. And when President Abraham Lincoln came in, Manchester workers chose to support his call an abolition of slavery, earning Lincoln's deep gratitude, shaping the city's identity as he sent his thanks to the Manchester working bees who suffered through this time, cutting off their work monies, cutting off the work that they were doing and refusing to undertake that work. Until the abolition of slavery was received. You can still see this influence today. If you go to Manchester, the public buses all have bees on them. The worker bees of Manchester are absolutely famous. And the bee symbol symbolizes the hard work and became prominent, like Manchester's industrial spirit, in its principal stand against slavery. These cities, these three examples, I hope, have shown that to develop sustainable communities, they need commitment to move forward, embracing new ideas, having the leadership to stay determined and to improve the lives of those in their cities. Thank you very much for listening today, and I'm happy to take some questions. Thank you. So I have quite a few messages in the chat. Are we designing cities for humans or humans adapting to the systems we build? I think there is a big challenge always that we need to have the leadership which will support the people of the city, the people of the community. They need to listen and they need to understand that they're building a place not just for economics. And I think for so long, economics has become, in a sense, the biggest and most dominant factor. It's important, it's vital, there's no doubt about it, but it cannot really exclude social capital, social cohesion, society. And we've seen, I believe, a bit too much of that. And the examples I've given you have all taken on board the need for social as well as economic progress. I hope that's helpful. What is the opportunities to enhance the role of knowledge within societies? This is a big challenge. I think that we've had years now of, and we've got disruption here at the moment, but we've had years of, in a sense, there being something called a cognitive elite, because many people were still working physically hard in industrial areas. And those who had adopted early into knowledge societies were becoming oblivious to the consequences of this transition for many people's lives. If we look at the closure of the coal mines in the Midlands in the 1980s, if we look at what's happening in Wales at the moment, we see people who have been excluded because they do not have the wider skills and wider abilities to work in new and less physical areas. And I think that's a real opportunity. And I'm so pleased that the Knowledge Quarter has taken up the issues of engaging with the young people in the community to show them and to help them gain lessons, to help them gain practical experience in the companies that are engaged in that Knowledge Quarter. So it's beyond innovation, it's a very strong engagement in the social communities in Camden and the young people getting opportunities to see that there are jobs for them at this time. So the role of AI is going to be presenting another big challenge, and that is a major issue, which I think if we have leadership, thoughtfulness, and recognition of the importance of social capital, we may be able to adapt. Although at the moment, this is controlled externally and not in the hands of cities. Although there may be cities who decide on various fronts to take action on it. It's a complicated area and we need a really active discussion on that. I'm being asked also, is there a criteria to define a city? Well, there are many, many definitions on cities, and there are ISO criteria out there about a city, and they vary from time to time because in a society and a place like the UK with a very long history, many cities were designated from above, from the king, from others, king or the queen, just because of they had a cathedral, and many cities were named cities because they had a cathedral, and they may be small towns now. So it's a very in imprecise definition, but it's really about built up areas that come together and that draw communities together and economies together. But there are many, many definitions out there of size. Interestingly, in reading for this presentation, Tokyo was one of the biggest cities in the world, but it is one of the shrinking cities. And they say it will go down from the biggest city in the world down to number 7 in the coming years because of their aging population. So it is a big challenge to define what is a city, but a built-up area and a community that comes together. And many of these things would apply to villages as well, smaller communities. There's another question, final question, I think. Achieving innovations contribute to supporting and stabilizing the region, reducing the intensity of conflicts. This is a very difficult question, but I think if we look towards Singapore for this example, Singapore was in the 1960s not a safe place to live, not a safe place to go to. It had lots of crime, it had lots of difficult things, And now I think it is very much respected for how it has transformed that. So there are ways to, but again, it comes back to leadership and knowing what is needed in that specific area. Context is vital. Context is so important. So understanding what the challenges are, what the issues are, is absolutely vital to try to address them. Innovations, well, innovations have become. I think there are social innovations, but mainly this is about progress in a knowledge-based economy. But there are social innovations that can happen also. And there's a program in Finland. And if we look to the Nordic countries, one can see that some of the cities in Finland, Espoo, and various other places there, have taken up these issues of binding communities together, how they do that, how they make the cities, the regions feel part of a bigger community and keeping it sustainable by interaction and engagement. And the final question I have here is, do sustainable communities come at a cost? Are there any drawbacks? I'm going to answer that very straightforward. Of course they come at a cost, but the cost to whom? Too often the cost is to those who have no power. But costs may be valuable. And I would say there are absolutely few drawbacks, even in situations like the Welsh Valleys at the moment, where industry is declining. If you manage it, if you understand that sustainability doesn't occur without effort, and you have to balance economic, social, and environmental altogether. And sometimes one of these will play too strongly against the others, meaning that there are fragilities in the system, but systems are complex. But context is vital. And I'm going to stop there. Thank you very much.